Welcome to the channel about unidentified flying object and an anomalous aerospace phenomenon scientifically. A researcher who decides to study UFOs is forced to rely mainly on his own experience, spending time getting acquainted with the literature, which is far from always available in free access, spending time searching for historical materials on UFOs in his region or country, compile catalogs or watch lists instead of adding individually investigated cases to a single database, etc. A UFO researcher spends a significant part of his time and finances on what has already been done many times before him. In any science, the acquired knowledge is accumulated, systematized, and made available to the next generation. There is a unified system of classification, terminology, refereed journals with indexing of articles, reliable storage of the obtained material, and raising the rank of a scientist in proportion to his knowledge and achievements, etc. Ufology is only approaching these standards, and the number of scientific publications in this field is still relatively small. A low degree of formalization and standardization also leads to the fact that clear professional requirements and requirements for the product of activity are not put forward, and therefore a pseudo-expert environment is formed, with unorganized publications, low responsibility, and inconsistent terminology. The degree of use of strict scientific standards and ethical norms in research also needs to be improved. Unlike research funded by either the state or private capital, ufology mainly requires other sources of funding. As a rule, the study of UFOs is secondary work, in the time free from the main work, which cannot but affect the quality and duration of research. However, it is also difficult to capitalize on such research. The most honest way is to create your own ufological organization with membership fees and a printed newsletter. However, but acting to obtain and implement grants, publishing in indexed publications, etc., researchers are forced to engage more in the popularization of research than the research itself, which is a general trend of modern globalized science. Other methods lead to the appearance of materials of a low scientific level, or even falsified ones, which distorts the general scientific picture since the collected materials are considered mainly as a potential means of profit, and not as something that has scientific and applied value. In other cases, the capitalization leads to restrictions in the dissemination of the acquired knowledge, or attempts to hide it. Ultimately, this leads to a loss of materials. This is how the priceless archives of Vanek, the author of manuscripts on UFO movement systems, and Ryom Varlamov perished. If a researcher dies without taking care of the fate of his archives, then one of the first to want to appropriate the accumulated materials will be those who see in them only a monetary component. In the absence of a will, all materials will most likely immediately disappear from view and become inaccessible to serious researchers. It happens that relatives throw all the papers of the deceased into the trash, considering them unnecessary junk. In the scientific world, such a loss of knowledge in peacetime is impossible. We can also cite a well-known example, when the Moscow archive of the Commission on Anomalous Phenomena under the Academy of Sciences was initially stored in the basement because there was no space, and then the hot water pipe burst, and everything turned into paper mush, which was raked out with shovels. Only what was left at home by Petukov and Faminaska survived. Plato, having collected the Izmarin archive, after the disbandment of the group in 1996, dumped most of the documents on UFOs in his garage, and then sold this garage. The new owners properly cleaned it, throwing everything extra into the trash. And in the nearby suburbs of Moscow, Pushkin's active ufological group split in the 1990s. During the split, her archive was destroyed so that it would not reach the majority. Another example is the loss of artifacts and documentation related to the Kropotkin incident on November 17, 1987, including the metal that caused the breakdown of the equipment for structural and elemental analysis of samples of the Institute of Nuclear Research of the Academy of Sciences of the Ukrainian SSR. The wreckage of the aircraft, unknown to almost no one, was handed over by Inna Kuznetsova for SRCAA Zond, was temporarily stored at the institute. Contrary to assurances about the integrity of the archive, the members of the center learned the terrible news: the documents were stored as waste paper. The disappearance of many materials, boxes of photographic films, etc. was noticed. It was during this period that the artifact was stolen from the archive. Cases of theft of materials by television broadcasters can be called frequent. Thus, the examinations of a series of UFO photographs taken by Korchagin in St. Petersburg in the summer of 1992 has disappeared. Representatives of the REN-TV channel filmed the program at Mikhail Gerstein's home. They took a photo of the folder with documents in good light. They said, "We will definitely return it," and they returned it, but not all of them. We had to count all the pieces of paper one by one. I realized it too late. A similar example is the disappearance of materials related to the case of the nuclear bomber on May 16, 1970, when SRCAA Zond was forced to entrust the transportation of the archive from Kharkiv to Kiev to the Inter TV channel. The military and special services are usually suspected of excessive secrecy in relation to UFOs. But in the West, for some reasons, there are military documents about UFOs with minimal censorship, which is usually due to ethical considerations, names of witnesses and their addresses. The volume of documents opened by ufological organizations is several orders of magnitude smaller. To change this situation, first it is necessary to change the attitude toward the available materials about UFOs and to do everything so that they do not disappear and are as accessible as possible to other researchers. The easiest way is digitization, which allows you to quickly copy materials, transfer them to colleagues, or put them on the internet. In the latter case, some censorship is necessary, as many eyewitnesses do not want to see their name, surname, or address publicly available. Digitized materials should be stored in at least 2 locations to avoid loss in the event of a hard drive failure. The ideal option is to save a copy on an external drive in a separate location to avoid loss during a fire or other natural disasters. Digitization of non-unique materials, newspaper clippings, books, or thematic magazines, should be coordinated with colleagues to avoid duplication. Ideally, there should be a single server where you can discover if something is available digitally and where you can get it. There are several examples of the loss of electronic data due to the lack of backup copies. For example, Mikhail Gerstein lost a 500 GB hard drive video recording over Barnaul on the night of December 31 to January 1, 2008, and Igor Kalitiuk at the end of 2013. The hard drive fell out of hand. This led to the temporary loss of almost all available archives, including materials that were in a single copy, the self-removal from the post of the head of the EIBC Center, and a delay in the release of the Jubilee Bulletin, which had to be done again almost from scratch. If the amount of materials is too large to digitize, you must take care of their fate in advance. It should be clearly stated who should inherit the archive and under what conditions. The best thing is to bequeath everything to an independent organization that can organize their high-quality storage and free access by interested ufologists. The largest organization of this kind can be called Archives for the Unexplained, AFU, in Sweden. Fully equipped AFU warehouses contain more than 2 kilometers of shelves. This organization has more than 20,000 books at its disposal, not to mention thematic magazines and other documents. Thus, the transfer of materials into electronic archives and their systematization is one of the urgent tasks in ufology. In the next part, I will tell you exactly how the archive of UFO researchers is stored, digitized, and catalogued. Leave comments, this will help promote the channel. Thank you all for your attention. Subscribe and press the bell. Well, we will be back soon with a new video.